Financial Literacy 101 class. For those who don't know who I am, I think everybody here knows who I am, but I'm still say. My name is Abdul Rashid Akbar, all right, and I'm your teacher for today.
Wow.
Okay. Today's class, as you see on the screen here, is part 3 of our budgeting. It's budgeting your money, part 3, and there are 3 budget tips that I'm going to cover today, and then inshallah, next first Sunday, we'll start on another area. But anyway, let me tell you where this information comes from, so you understand that it doesn't come from me. All right. It comes from the book of Mr. Robert Kiyosaki. I've been teaching a lot of his books now since probably over the last year and a half. And this comes from his book, Managing Your Money, getting more out of your money. And he has 5 chapters. This one is on budgeting. And we've covered several areas of his of budgeting for the last 3 first Sundays. This one, we're going to cover his last 3 budget tips. This budget tip number 2, 3, and 4. The expense column is your crystal ball. That's budget tip number 2. My assets pay for my liabilities. And then budget tip number 4, spend to get rich. Spend to get rich. Now, when we get to that budget tip number 4, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that one. Okay, so I don't know how many people remember the story of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is his first book. How many people know what I'm speaking of when I say Rich Dad, Poor Dad? All right. Let me just briefly, for those who don't, let me just briefly tell you who these individuals are, who Mr. Kiyosaki is, so you can have a context. Mr. Kiyosaki, the author of the book that I'm using, born and raised in Hawaii, 4th generation Japanese. 4th generation Japanese. All right, and raised in Hawaii. His biological dad is highly educated dad. He has 2 PhDs. He raised to become the director of education for the state of Hawaii. Right? Now, that's his biological dad, and that dad is who he calls his poor dad. Right? Now, his rich dad. His rich dad was really his best friend's dad. Okay, you know how best friends are, right? When you're growing up, they could be seen everywhere they go together. But his best friend's dad had no more than a high school education. All right, no more than a high school education, but became one of the wealthiest men in the state of Hawaii, and had construction companies. We call them now A&M, or when you go to service stations now, you see those stores in those service stations. But back then they called them luncheonettes. So those who've been around a little bit, you know what a luncheonette is, right? Okay. He had several of those, and he just did a lot in terms of business. He had owned some of the most wealthiest or the most valuable property in Hawaii. All self-taught, self-learned. He called him his rich dad. And he got educated from both. Both tried to educate him and encourage him to go on a certain path. His educated dad, which is his poor dad, said, go to school so you can get a good job, so you can get some good benefits, so you can eventually retire. That'd be the way to go. His rich dad said, yeah, go to school, but go to school so you can learn how to build businesses. Okay? And so you can become wealthy one day and pass something on to those or your descendants. All right. So he had these 2 avenues, these 2 messages he was receiving. He had to make a decision which way he was going to go. He decided to take the route that is rich dad. Okay. So that's the context now. So when we talk about rich dad, poor dad, understand the context that I'm speaking of, right? All right. So, Mr. Kiyosaki wrote these books. And he started with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He wrote the book so he could give the experience that he had. He wanted to provide that and give that to others. So that those who start out just like he started off, poor, struggling, could become wealthy or whatever, however they wanted to, whatever they wanted to do. But they wouldn't have to struggle for money all their life. All right. And he always said this, and this they don't do. And this is why it's so important that what I decided to do, what Allah's blessing is this. They don't teach about money in school. They don't teach you what I've been teaching for the last year, 2 years. They don't teach it in school. You will not get it in school. Hence, his first book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what the rich teach their children that the poor and middle class don't. You can only teach your children or your grandchildren, whatever, that which you know. If you don't know it, you can't teach it. So if they're not teaching it in school, where are they getting it from? They can only get it in the home. So wealthy people teach their children how they acquire their wealth and how to carry it on. But the poor middle class don't know this. So hence they don't know it, they can't teach it. So, the old adage, the rich get richer, poor stay poor, and the middle class just gets squeezed. All right. Now you can understand where this comes from. If you because now you have historical context to put it in there. So when he started teaching this, really he was discouraged from writing the books and teaching it. But Allah blessed me to find it. Now there may be some others who have found it also, but Allah blessed me to find it. And I found it almost 10 years ago and started applying those same principles. Listen to Imam Muhammad, applying those same principles, and then when I really came to understanding that Allah is the originator of all the systems of knowledge. All the systems of knowledge. Okay? And how this man, Robert Rich Dad, was self-taught. Wasn't Elijah Muhammad, wasn't he self-taught? Mm-hmm. Wasn't he self-taught? Yeah. So all this stuff started to click it. All right? You can rise to where you want to rise to if you have the information, if you have the knowledge. All right? And that's what I've been blessed. So that's what I'm, now you have a context, can understand where we're going now. All right? So, these budget tips. So, Robert's Rich Dad taught him. You can tell a lot about a person's future by looking at what they spend their time and money on. Okay? You can tell a lot about a person's future by looking at what they spend their time and their money on. You can tell how important a budget surplus is to a person by looking at their expense column. The expense column is a person's crystal ball. All right, now, the last time we made a presentation, we were talking about budget surplus. All right? A surplus is always better than a what? There you go. Now, come on here. That's right. Just better than deficit. All right? A surplus means you have what? Somebody define surplus for me. Which is the class now.
Excess.
Okay, excess more than what you need, right? A deficit is you have less. Okay, all right. This is a class. I'm just the presenter, okay? We're all going to learn together here, all right? Because I want you all to be as wealthy as I am when I walk out of here, okay?
I know that's right.
All right, so, I want you to look at this. I can't test you on what this is because I got the title right there. Income statement and balance sheet. All right, but an income statement. You see the income, and the income comes in to this person through what? Come on, it's there. Okay, it's right there. No, it's right there. It's okay, good. Let's paycheck. Expenses. You see the expenses, right? All right. Look at those expenses. Now, look down at the balance sheet. The balance sheet is assets and liabilities.
We really can't see it
Because of where it is?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we have to work with what we have, okay? And eventually, we'll be in an area where we can even do better, but I have to work with what I have. So let me just say what the liabilities. Liabilities are home mortgage, car payment, credit card debt,